Cheers. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session of the BJCA's Women in Cardiology Mentoring Program. It's a real pleasure to welcome all of you here today. My name is Jagdeep, and I'm a cardiology registrar at in Edinburgh in Royal Infirmary. And we've got a fantastic program lined up for you today. I understand we've got the whole spectrum of people. We've got consultants, we've got cardiology trainees, we've got junior doctors, even medical students here, and we've got something for everybody. So let's just go ahead and make a start. Sarah Birkhoelzer is the BJCA's Women in Cardiology representative, and she's going to be talking to us about setting up a mentorship program. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Jagdeep, and welcome to everybody tonight. We have over 50 people registered and most of them on the way in. So can you see my screen? Fabulous. So I'll be talking to you about in the next 5 minutes or so about how I set up this mentorship program for women in cardiology. Let me just... So this is just a little timeline over the last year. I took over the role as British Junior Cardiologists Association Women in Cardiology and Flexible Training Representative earlier last year in June. And one of the first things I thought I wanted to do is set up a mentorship program for women in cardiology. And this was based on a social media campaign. Most of the people who signed up to the program connected with me via Twitter or other social media channels. And in July last year, we had our launch event where the mentors introduced themselves to the people attending the webinar. And subsequently, these people have then emailed me their wishes, the mentors they wanted to have, and I matched all the mentees with a mentor. Most of the mentors have 1 to 3 mentees, and they were supposed to meet initially, and then within sort of 6 months, and then at the end of the year, which we're soon approaching. And most of those have met at least once. And to get them all on the same page, I thought we need to get some official teaching on mentorship. So Alexis has kindly offered to do workshops for us. And for this to happen, we needed some funding. So you can see me at the top running with my double pushchair and my 6-month-old and my 3.5-year-old, 125 miles in August, raising over £3,000 to facilitate official workshops led by Alexis, Hutson, a professional coach and mentor. And all of the mentors and mentees have attended those workshops in mixed groups in September and subsequently met and enjoyed their mentoring sessions. And today is really about reflecting of what they've learned from the last year, but also to learn from Alexis the next steps of we can learn about mentoring and how to structure a mentoring conversation, how to set goals. And this is a screenshot from the last webinar. Forgive me for those who don't look as pretty as they would do in real life. And the names of all of the mentors, some of which are attending tonight, are highlighted around the group. And it was really a great event, and we had a good number of people attending. And I just wanted to highlight why we're doing this. And this is a great paper from my predecessor, Hannah Sinclair, about women in cardiology, and highlights the fact that 50% of medical students are female, and 50% of core medical trainees are female. But for some reason, there's a leak in the pipeline, and only 28% of female people end up as cardiology trainees, and even less as consultants. And for those who don't know, that paper is a great read, so I can thoroughly recommend it. And this is another paper highlighting the importance of mentoring, and this is a BMJ paper, and that assessed 75 studies and studies about medical students, what influences their subspecialty choice. And highlighted in red here is that teachers and mentors influence the subspecialty choice of medical students, and this is really where we're wanting to aim at And this is why it's so great that Amelia has led the subsequent mentorship program, also supported by Alexis, which was launched earlier this year, mainly focused on medical students. And then some feedback from the last cohort to get some insight what mentees want to gain from this mentorship program. And it's most of those people want to achieve specific goals and enhance networking opportunities. But the main goal for me was to improve the professional and personal well-being of trainees, and some other motivations. Then important to mention the amazing mentors who inspired so many of us, and what is their motivation to be part of it. And I think it's really important to highlight that they take pride in developing the next generation, is highlighted here in yellow, but also just to belong to a network and to find a sense of purpose. And what I also want to highlight is that none of them gain any personal sort of benefit out of a higher salary or any benefit beyond that. And then I've asked both of the mentors and the mentees halfway through their experience whether they have made any changes to their personal life, and 60% did say they did make changes to their personal life. And I asked the same question about their professional life, and again 73% said they made changes to their professional life, which is really reassuring. Which is also reassuring is that all of those participants who responded to the survey have would recommend this to their colleagues, and I'm hoping that we lead the way to scale up the unit to for Cree and Josephine will lead the next group of mentees and mentors later on this year. And thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sarah, for that great overview about mentoring and this mentorship program in particular. We'll now move on to Peter Haworth and Josephine Mansell, who are going to talk to us about their experience of being a mentor and a protege. I don't like the word mentee as much, but protege sounds a lot nicer. Peter is a consultant interventionalist down in Portsmouth, and Joe is an ST4 trainee in London. And I think what we've decided is we're just going to have an informal chat between the two of you, just sharing your experience with everyone here today. Over to you.
Oh, that's really, really great. Thanks. I hope you can all hear me. I'm sat in the clinic room in the hospital, and the sound is notoriously bad, so I'll do my very best. I suppose the most amazing thing is that everyone's here, and that's a real testament to how well the program is going and how much people are investing in it. When I first heard about it from Sarah, I thought it was a really exciting project, mostly because the people that really influenced me in my life, in my career, have been looking after my whole life as part from just my cardiology side of things. And I realized very quickly when I was training that we do get the work-life balance side of things very wrong a lot of the time in the UK, and that by changing that, we can actually improve your training, and you can improve your productivity at work, and you can improve your family life, your relationships, as well as improving your training. So that's why I was really excited about it. And it all cropped up at the time when I was just doing my appraisal training, so learning to be an appraiser. And so it really married in for me. And I found the teaching from Alexis absolutely brilliant. Just learning to stop and listen to people. And I found that really, really, really helpful. I think you learn so much when you just stop and listen to someone. And as consultants, I think we are generally pretty bad about just stopping and listening to people because we're busy. We want the answer to the question. We want to know what to do next to move things on. So that's why I got involved in it. And I must say, I don't like the word mentee as well. It sounds very much like it should be some kind of mint that you buy from the shop. But it's great to meet such amazing, inspiring individuals. I don't think that, I'd be amazed if they've learned anything from me, but I have learned an awful lot from listening to them. And really, I've seen my job as just listening to them and helping them come to, their own decisions and to learn what's best for them. And so I've got 3 mentees, and we've met, all of us we've met 2 twice and 1 just once so far. And I just listen to them, and these are amazing individuals who have accomplished so much, much more than I'd ever done at that level of training. And so I really just felt that my job there was to be an encourager. And I think that's sometimes really helpful, just to be an encourager and say, look, you're doing really great. We discussed things and goals that they wanted to achieve. When I said, let's set some goals, I said, let's set 2 work goals and 1 goal that's completely different, because I wanted to know what they did outside work and, what they did in their to relax. And things get so important. And so we set 2 work goals and 1 outside work. And we had some amazing things outside work, learn to make souffles and practice the piano and get a piano exam and stuff. And it was just really encouraging when I got feedback, and in fact I got sent loads of photos of souffles, which cluttered up my Twitter feed, which is great. You got to like a picture of a good souffle. So yeah, that was really great, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think not only has it helped me in my relationships with work colleagues and with trainees, but it's helped my personal life as well. I think the training applies to all areas of life. Learning to listen to people a bit more, learning to be a bit more of an encourager. I think those are really important things. I don't know, what about you, Jovi? How did you find?
I think that what you started with, especially talking about listening, is one of the most valuable things that I learned from the whole thing. And as I said, the sort of pleasure I've got from the whole program that Sarah set up, it started way back before I was even matched with my mentor, and it started with Alexis's webinar, and sort of realizing that I think we always think that listening should be passive because you're the one listening and they're the one talking. And actually Alexis taught us how hard it can be to listen, and how much as doctors, I think that we spend a lot of time trying to seek out information, whether it's from our patients, relatives, and it's often us diverting a consultation the way we want it to go. And I think what's really brilliant about mentoring is you may set out your goals, but often it starts with a much more of a blank canvas. And so I think that you, as I feel slightly arrogant saying protege, or mentee, you get to decide what it may be that you want to get out of this. And that can also be something that's very dynamic and changes with time. And I think it's important to I know we all talk about COVID a lot, but actually, I think what's been really brilliant about the mentorship program is that if you'd have asked me pre-COVID what I would have wanted to get out of it, I probably would have given quite quantitative answers only. So, want to know about research, I want to know about the best interventional fellowships, can I go and do a taste week in structural and so on. And those are all really important things, and they're really important goals. And I guess now more than ever, with everything that's gone on, it's important to focus on your goals and keep your sort of personal drive and motivation up. But the thing I found most valuable about it was I was able to start having a conversation and a dialogue with someone who is, and I like everyone I work with very much, but outside of my deanery, outside of my hospital. And I remember that was something that Sarah was very deliberate about when she thought about the planning of this. And in doing that, she's been able to create this space where I won't divulge what was discussed, not that it's anything particularly exciting, but creating that space where you actually can ask things that as a trainee perhaps you've held back before because you don't want to ask things, because is it a sign of, sometimes particularly as doctors, we think if we admit that anything is a challenge, we think it's somehow a display of weakness. And I was shown very much the opposite by my mentor, and I was amazed at what I felt I could discuss, and I was amazed at how much more it related to life and how work and life should start to merge, rather than this preconception that I think I personally had, which is that they can only be sequential, they can't work together. So you do your training and then you do other things that perhaps you wanted to do, and I think that's essential for our careers anyway as doctors, because I agree that the work-life balance is quite off, but I think for a lot of us it's been quite a thought-provoking year. And perhaps our priorities have changed, and what you may have wanted to get out of the program at the beginning is perhaps slightly different to what you want to get out of it at the end. And just also to touch on what Sarah was saying, we've got Amelia here who's setting up a medical student mentorship program, and it's the way that your own experiences and what you learn from either being a protege or a mentor, you can then utilize and hopefully do similar things. So I'm going to become a mentor. But again, that was my experience of doing that has definitely been enhanced by the fact that I've already been on the receiving end of it. And I've known all the things that are really valuable and make a massive difference. So it's kind of the playing it forward concept, which I think is something that can work really well in mentoring, I think.
Yeah, I think this year has been really important, like you say, just to have a bit of a checking in time. So check in on people, and I think having someone who can check in on you from somewhere else is really, really important. I think it's been a really helpful bit. But I like what you're saying about being able to have a conversation. It's like flattening the hierarchy as well, because this hierarchy we have at work, and you feel that you can't ask these questions, and they're flattening the hierarchy and being able to go outside the kind of your local structure. I think has been so helpful for this. And it's enabled us to do really cool things, like we did some interview practice. So I even wrote Sarah in as the nasty interviewer. So she played nasty cop and I played good cop, and we did a really good interview practice and stuff. And that's really nice to be able to do, because it helps to just to take some kind of the unknowns out of everything. Yeah. So would you do you do it again? Would you, Joe?
100% I would do it. And like I said, it's led to me becoming a mentor. And it's something I think, and Sarah, you said this before, I think that mentorship is it's a whole cultural change. It's something that, many of us maybe have experienced in an informal way at different points in our careers. And it's all about, you meet those people that inspire you. And exactly like you said earlier, the people that stick in your head, it's not only of course, amazing clinicians, and you see really exciting things, whether it's in the cath lab or on CCU, and that makes you think, I want to do this. But it's when you come across people that are able to drop their guard a little bit in the right scenario and make you sort of demystifies things, and you realize everyone is human. And I think, although that may sound very obvious, I think for a group of people that are high achievers, and that can sometimes become a bit pathological, I think that's really, really important to learn. And that's I think for me, that's the true meaning of a role model, is not just someone who you want to emulate their incredible CV, but you think, that's the sort of consultant that I'd like to be like, one that knows how to make souffles, which I would not do because I can't make toast, but something along those lines, I think is really important.
Yeah, for me, I just feel this intense sense of pride about the people that I've had the pleasure to talk to. I mean, they are truly amazing individuals, and I feel somewhat proud that one day there'll be famous cardiology consultants. I'll say, I know them. I've had the pleasure of knowing them. So that's exactly won't be anything to do with me. It'll all be due to themselves. But it's nice to be involved on the way up.
Brilliant. Well, that's really fantastic, and it's really nice to get this perspective both from the mentor and the protege. And clearly, we can see here that there's so much to be gained, not just for the protege. A lot of times you think that as a mentor, you don't have very much to gain, and you're kind of, you stand on your pedestal and you're offering your words of wisdom and so on. But actually, there's so much to be gained as a mentor as well. And as you can see, there's so much that you can do. There's just so many things that you can explore, so many different facets of your professional, and even maybe a little bit of outside of your professional life as well. And which then segues very nicely into the next bit, where how do we structure all of this? How do we get a proper, and that's something that I've always struggled with, and I've mentored, informally before, and how do you structure your sessions and set goals and targets and performance indicators, as it were? And that's what Alexis Houston is going to talk to us about. And Alexis is she's absolutely fantastic. And shall we just segue right into that, Alexis? And we'll have about an hour, or maybe slightly less than that, 45 minutes or so of your session, and we can have some Q&As at the end. Over to you, Alexis.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jagdeep. I appreciate that. Well, I'm going to start off by screen sharing and get you straight into the material so that we can start exploring all of this stuff a little bit more closely with you. Can you see the slides okay? Give me a thumbs up. We all good to go? Excellent. All right. So as we've already heard from Jagdeep, Josephine and Peter, then the actual nature of the conversation, that's where it all happens. That's where the magic happens in terms of people being encouraged and inspired and given permission to, you know, make up their own minds and all of that kind of stuff. But is it a dark art? Is it something that actually is something that is happening by pure instinct, or is it something that you're drawing on from your own experience? You know, how does it actually happen? So what I want to do with this session this evening is to build on what we talked about in the workshops last September in terms of thinking about what developmental mentoring is all about and start to think about what it actually looks like in real life. And as Sarah said earlier, you know, I was the person who is the trainer for everybody on the scheme. And the reason that I was asked to do that is because I am a coach and mentor for doctors all over the UK and further afield. And I run a lot of workshops around non-clinical skills for doctors all over the place, really. So I've got a lot of experience to share with you about mentoring. And crucially, as I work through some of the material with you this evening, I'm going to use anonymized case studies as a way of illustrating how this might play out in the actual structure of the conversation. And it really is that they come from real life experiences and real life conversations, but helpfully, I think they will put it into perspective what this kind of stuff can actually look like. So the purpose of this webinar, I know that there's, you know, what we talked about in that first session in terms of developmental mentoring, and I'm going to do a little bit of a recap just so that we all know where we're coming from with this, is that we really want to create that safe environment, that nice, supportive, independent, non-judgmental environment where people can do the very best thinking for themselves so that they feel okay about what they're talking about and what they want to share. But equally, we want to make it productive. We want to make it purposeful. So it's not just a nice, safe chat with the very lovely Peter. Actually, we want it to be moving somewhere and making progress and having some sort of traction associated with it, so that by the time you next go back to your mentor, who's Peter, something's happened and progress has been made, as well as the souffle baking, obviously. So it's striking the balance between these two things, nice, safe, supportive, but productive, and moving forward, that is really important. And that balance is what we're going to be talking about this evening. So we're going to talk about the structure of a productive, deliberately developmental conversation. I'm going to use the GROW model, and I'm going to explain where that comes from and why it's useful. And I'm also going to talk about goal setting. And I might draw on what Joe and Peter have already shared with us to help us think about that in a bit more detail, because what they've already shared with us is actually quite rich data that I can mine for the purposes of my presentation. So very, very, very quick reminder, developmental mentoring, the nature of developmental mentoring and the key behaviour, which our people have already talked about. Now, the reason I want to kind of reconnect us with developmental mentoring is because it's quite easy to kind of lose the plot and get a bit lost in all of this, really. Just to remind you, the whole point about mentoring, the whole point about these conversations is to get the best out of people, is to draw the learning out rather than to simply shovel in more information. So Peter's great. I'm sure his CV is amazing. But what we don't want is lots of new Peters. What we need is lots of different kinds of people who've got lots of different kinds of experiences, which have built on their own experience, their own confidence, their own ideas about how they want to move forward with their careers and their lives. And so, because we don't want lots and lots and lots of Peters, however lovely he is, what we want to do is to encourage people to make their own journey, to actually discover their own quest in terms of where they are going with their lives and their careers. And that is an unknown destination at the moment. We can't predict the future, okay?
All we can do is base our decisions based on the experience that we've had and that we are currently having. And what that means is we have to make things up as we go along. In reality, that is the hard truth of life. And so in developing our own ideas, in actually reflecting on our experiences and actually drawing the learning out of our own minds, we have a much better chance of making a good solid decision for us, rather than simply following the kind of mystical idea of what a successful career might look like. It's much more grounded in reality, the reality of my life, who I am, where I'm working, and what I want to do. And actually what Jo was saying earlier in her little introduction was that, you know, we can get very locked into the professional goals, the professional, you know, pathway that we're on. But the reality is life is a much more tangled mess than that. And actually we have to experience both our life from a personal perspective and from a professional perspective as we are living it. Okay. And so understanding that tangled mess, and that it is not going to be a beautiful straight line that's linear, you know, devoid of mess and difficulty. It is going to be complicated. So we are here to get the best out of people with developmental mentoring. And what we really want to make sure that we understand is that this is not about power. Now, what I will get slightly pedantic about here is terminology. So I understand why people don't like the word mentee. It feels a bit kind of clumsy, and it feels a bit sort of odd, really. Mentor, mentee, or learner, or inspirer, or whatever. But actually the word protege is problematic. And it's problematic because what we are not trying to do, sorry, Jagdeep, I'll talk to you about that later when we're offline. But what we're not talking about here is structured mentoring. That's the old-fashioned notion of being locked into a hierarchy kind of relationship. He's more senior than me, she's more junior than me. And actually, you know, I am beholden to Peter to gift me the pearls of wisdom that he's willing to kind of share with me, the secret information that I can't Google, and then I will be forever grateful to him and beholden to him because he has blessed me by allowing me to be his protege. Yeah. That's not what we want to do, because it is a disparity in the power, and it causes problems in terms of our ability to think equally with each other. So developmental mentoring is very much characterized by a flattening of the hierarchy and an equalizing of the power. So Jo and Peter, they're not mentor and mentee, but let's, for the purposes of this conversation, say they are coming together as equal adults. Josephine is not a senior consultant at this point. Peter is not still in trainee, but they are both adults. They are meeting as equal partners in this developmental conversation. Okay, they are concentrating on Jo's stuff because she is the person who is learning officially in this conversation. But actually, they are both working with the material, and they're both sharing experiences to help the person who is learning overtly here at the moment, Jo, to sort out what she wants to do. Now, Peter's already alluded to the fact that he's learned way more than he thinks his mentees have learned. And that's because developmental mentoring, when it's done well, becomes reciprocal, becomes symbiotic, because both parties in this really gain from the experience, gain from the conversation. And that's why it's a much more sustainable, much more powerful way of creating a mentoring conversation than the old school structured model, which is based on that disparity in hierarchy. So I just want to correct that terminology, because I think it's quite important that everybody's coming at this from the same position in terms of what a good quality developmental mentoring conversation looks like. Okay, so what both our people, both Jo and Peter, talked about right from the beginning was really about the key behaviour in all of this. They both talked overtly about listening, and that's because I laid it on with a trowel within the workshops. There was no escaping it, and I forced everybody into listening pairs and doing all kinds of uncomfortable activities to really force the issue. But the interesting thing is that what Jo said is, she said, I'm so used to listening for information, you know, and she said, we as doctors do that a lot, because you're looking to understand where the problem is, what the diagnosis might be, how I might need to fix this or create an intervention that's appropriate. And there's nothing wrong with that. What we're saying is that in the form of these developmental conversations in mentoring, then actually we need to be much more open-minded about how we listen, so that we can give space for the person who needs to think out loud and needs to explore their own experiences, that actually they've got the space to do that without being interrupted or without being contaminated by what you think this is about or how you might need to fix it with the other person, really. So actually, I will share this data with you, that there's 3 years ago, a place called the Gottman Institute in Seattle did some research. And what they did is they measured how long it takes for most professional listeners, and I'm talking about doctors, therapists, social workers, you know, how long does it take for those types of professionals to interrupt when they're listening to another person. And 3 years ago, that was 20 seconds. And the horrific truth is they redid that last year in 2020. They remeasured how long it takes those people to interrupt, and we're now down to 11 seconds. So we are inherently bad at this, and we're getting worse at it as well. So we really need to catch ourselves. We really need to catch ourselves for, you know, wanting to be involved so much in the conversation and wanting to kind of fix stuff and to check content and stuff. And so this space of a developmental conversation should feel different to our normal kinds of conversations, because we're much more concerned with listening. The mentor is concerned with listening to the totality of what the mentee is saying or not saying, or sharing or not sharing. And the mentee is listening to what they're talking about, is listening to what they are willing to share, is listening to how they are explaining things. So it is a really important, crucial behavior in the whole mentorship thing. And actually, one of the things that I often say to people is that, remember, you're not mentoring the problem, you're mentoring the person. And that's a really nice reminder in terms of understanding where your focused attention should be on. You know, if you're focusing too much on the problem, then the danger is you're going to get sucked into it and you'll get contaminated by the drama, and then you won't be as useful, because you've got to stay objective and independent from the material that the person is sharing with you. Okay, so hopefully that was a useful reminder, and I've given you some additional kind of thoughts about developmental mentoring and where these conversations should be coming from, and how they should, the underlying theory, the underlying intention of where they should be from. But if you just remember this one thing, this is about being on a journey with another person who's on a quest to develop their own understanding of where they're going and what they want to do with them. You're not there to tell them how to do it, to tell them how you did it, to tell them how they should be doing it. You're there to help them figure out how they should be doing it. And that's the most important thing. So let's get into the next part of this, this webinar then, and start to talk about the structure of the conversation. So this is, you know, you could be reasonably sort of, it would be understandable if you'd left the first workshops and think, well, actually, as long as I just listen, that's all I need to do, right? Hey, it's, you know, I mean, it's really important that I active listening, but all I have to do is hold the space, right? Well, that's fine. And if you're doing that, that is you know, that's kind of your 80% there. But you want to ensure that the time is well spent, and you want to ensure that actually there's some realistic, appropriate actions are taking forward, so that it is purposeful. And so what I want to do is to help us think about how you spend the time well, really. Now, I've already talked about listening, and that being a really important gateway into the exploration, the drawing the learning out, so that people get those light bulb moments, they have the new understanding, and then they can get into action planning. And of course, the mistake that many of us make is we leapfrog over the top of all of these things and just go to that senior person with, well, what I think I need to do is this. You know, and we can bypass all the stuff that's gone in advance of that kind of endpoint. So actually, what we want to do is think about the time well spent, giving people time to think, and how do I create a structure in that part of the conversation that allows me to think we're moving forward here. We're making progress, and we've got some structure for how I can move this forward, because sometimes you will get lost. Sometimes you'll be sitting there as a mentor thinking, I have no idea what's going to happen about this. I have no idea where she's going with this, and I'm not sure how I can help, and this structure can help you do that. So the GROW model was developed by a guy called John Whitmore from a book called Coaching for Performance. It's a few years old now. It's probably 20 years old or something like that. But what it does is it provides a guide rope for how you craft your questions, which allows you to know that you're moving forward. So even if it's really foggy, really dark, you've got the guide rope of the GROW model. And this is how it goes. So you start your questions with the goal. And Peter said that helpfully earlier, didn't he? I want 2 professional goals and 1 personal goal. So what are we talking about here? Is there an overarching goal that is the kind of, where I want to be in 5 years? And then are there lots of intermediate goals? Is there a specific thing that we need to be talking about now in this session on this Wednesday evening, that gets you from A to B? And so how does that fit in with the overall long-term goal? So really making sure that you're landed in what is the purpose of this conversation, overarching, but also specifically to this actual session that we're in now. So that's fine. That seems logical, right? Yeah. Why are we here? What we're going to be talking about? And then you move into the R of the GROW model, reality. So somebody has explained what they want to achieve and where they want to be going with this. So now you want to check in with reality. So how far away are you from that goal at the moment? Is there any kind of stuff that's going on, any kind of history that we need to take on board, or is some of it irrelevant, or are there any kind of assumptions sloshing around in there that we just need to kind of, challenge? And are there any examples that you've got that you can share with me that helps us understand where we are with this goal? So we're really starting to get into the nitty-gritty of what this might look like. Seems okay so far? Okay, good. Now, so then we move into the options, the O part of the GROW model. So actually, now that we know what the goal is, we know where you are in the reality of how far you are away from that and what some of the sort of challenges or opportunities might be. So what are your options? Now that we've spent time looking at it, analysing it, investigating it, what are your options? Have you covered all the range of options that's available to you? Has some of the assumption checking that's gone on in the reality, number 2, is that helped erupt other options that you weren't aware of before? Would it be helpful if I give you some suggestions at this point? Because you might just not have thought of that at the moment. So you're starting to explore all the kind of options that somebody might need to move forward. Seems quite nice, neat, isn't it? It's all linear at the moment. And then the 4th part of this is the kind of way forward. So, okay, so we know where you're going with this. We've done a bit of kind of checking with reality. We've got a few good sort of options that feel pretty solid now. Which one are you going to choose? What's your way forward? Are you going to commit to action? What's going to get in your way? What's your kind of timescales and what are you going to do once you leave this meeting? So it's a nice way of organising your questions and knowing that you're moving through A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's all very neat and lovely, isn't it? But of course, the reality is most people need to buffer around this model. So you might, for example, start with goal. And I'm going to use a really silly, basic example just for the purposes of illustration. So I might have a goal. I might go to my coach or mentor and say, I need to get fit. Okay, so all right, so you need to get fit. So in what way do you want to get fit, Alexis? Well, I really love swimming. I'd really like to just be a better swimmer and to be able to be fit with swimming. Okay, so now we move to reality. Oops, excuse me. So now we move to reality. And so the person who's questioning me now says, so what you like as a swimmer? Oh, well, actually, it's a pretty poor breaststroke at best, actually. So, thinking about it, I can barely get from one end to the other at the moment, So actually, we probably need to go back into the goal now and to buffer back around into that first part and go, so actually, that goal needs to be much more specific. It needs to be much more smart. It needs to be much more associated with, okay, now that I know that I can only really do a very poor breaststroke, do I need some swimming lessons? If I'm going to be really serious about getting fit with swimming, do I actually need to be doing front crawl? Because actually, from a cardio point of view, that's the one that's going to really get all of my limbs going in the way that I need them to. So you move through these, and then you could move through to options about, are there any swimming lessons at the moment? Are there any pools open at the moment? All of those kinds of things that allow you to really sort of challenge your goal and the reality and the options that are available to you. So what I'm saying to you at the moment is this is a really nice model, and it's linear moving through these processes, but people will move around it and buffer back around. So as you move through goal, reality, and options and way forward, there's the chance that actually they might jump back down into goal if the process, that exploration, the opening up, has actually erupted some new data, new information, new insights that actually bring us back into the goal. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a kind of anonymized case study that shows that in progress, so that it becomes a little less theoretical and a little bit more real for you. So what I want you to sort of imagine, if you like, that the case study is Deepak, and that he's a GP working with a new leadership role in his local health community, okay? So, and he's in the middle of a pandemic, surprisingly. So what happened with Deepak is that he's halfway through a coaching program with me at the moment, and he's really enthusiastic about spreading his wings as a leader in a much more networked, much more bigger realm, rather than just his little practice, okay? So he's moving out into the community, and he really wants to understand his leadership role within that community. That's his overarching goal. Doesn't really know what it's going to look like at the moment, but he's got some responsibilities as part of the, you know, the local health community. And so what happened is he came to me in this session, and he was really, really angry, really frustrated, because a pop-up COVID vaccination clinic had happened and needed to happen, but was organised by somebody else and then landed in his lap at the last minute, and he had to go and run it without any prior information, and the CCG came and investigated it, and there was all this kind of stress and anxiety and difficulty involved with it. Turns out it went out really well, and he really enjoyed it. But the process of it being landed and dumped on him was really, really frustrated. So what happened is in that first part of the conversation, the coaching mentoring conversation, he spent about 15, 20 minutes just downloading all of this stuff and the frustration of what happened and why he wanted to just download it and be angry about it. So I asked him, well, you know, what would you like to be different? You know, so I stuck with the goal thing. What would you like to be different, and how would you like this to work for you in terms of your overarching sort of leadership goal, if you like? And he said, well, I just want to be included more earlier in the planning. I don't want to be dumped with this stuff at the last minute. You know, how can I be involved in those conversations where I know when this is happening and I can be involved in them? Now, when we went into reality and I asked him a bit more about that, well, the person that we've talked about before, actually, who's kind of leading this sort of whole area, is a bit of a land grab person, likes to do things themselves, likes to take the glory, a bit of an ego about how all of this is running. And so actually my person has tried repeatedly to get involved and ask for more information, but because this person is protecting it, it's actually very frustrating, and he can't get his hands on the information. And so actually then that took us back into the goal. I said, so what, let's reconnect with your overarching goal. I want to be more established as a leader in the health community, and I want to feel more confident about that role. So actually, what does that look like against the reality of this particular scenario and these pop-up COVID vaccination clinics and this situation that you find yourself in? So actually the feedback that he's had in some of the previous sessions is that he needs to actually take more responsibility. He needs to be, putting himself forward and doing this. So actually, through that part of that conversation, he was able to say, actually, I should just set up my own pop-up clinics. I have the authority. They want me to take the responsibility, but I'm being a bit tiptoey about this because I don't want to upset this person who's kind of a bit ego land grabby about stuff. So actually, when we went into the options part of the conversation, we were then able to have a conversation about, so in reality, are you allowed to set up your own pop-up clinics? Who would you go to? Can you go to the CCG, the people who are higher up than the realm that you're working with at the moment? And the answer was yes. Actually, they were encouraging. In fact, he met them when they dropped in on the clinic that he was there. So all of a sudden, the blockage that he felt was the person who was kind of trying to sort of control all of these pop-up clinics started to pull away. He'd got rid of the emotional frustration of I was dropped in it. I want to do more of it. And we were able to reconnect him with how can I grow as a leader and take more responsibility? And then he was able to plot a way forward. So he had the irritation of the pop-up clinic and the clinic disorganisation in the moment. He wants to be included in the organisation of this stuff more appropriately. The other person wants their own show and the glory. Yeah, I've done all these pop-up vaccination clinics. My guy, Deepak, wasn't sure how the system works in terms of the clinics. His options were do one alone, ask to be included, has asked that lots of times, hasn't been included, be prepared to just be dropped in at the last minute or just not get involved. And so actually for him, going back to this overarching goal, define leadership role in my local health community, allowed him to see that actually I can do stuff. And activities under my own steam and he has been told to take more charge is actually a good way for him to pick the option, if you like, to be independent and ask for higher up support. So his way forward was all about identifying who could help in the CCG, the week, the location, all of those kinds of challenges that were associated with it. So you can see through that case study how people will buffer background, and the process of almost like sieving out the information allows them to land. But having the guide rope of what's the goal, what's the reality of that, what might the options be, and then getting into the way forward can be a really helpful structure for those conversations. Does that make sense? Just nod happily. Okay, so let me just give you a summary on this structure then, which kind of just pulls all of that stuff together. You must remember that the mentee is leading the learning or the journey, okay? So for me and Deepak, I was never going to get involved in the kind of, oh my God, your boss is an idiot kind of stuff. That's not helpful. In my opinion about that is not helpful. It's them leading their journey and coming to their own conclusions about how he's going to move forward, which was really important. The structure is there to support the journey, but you shouldn't be rigidly holding on to it, that it then becomes a kind of a death grip around how you structure your conversations. And that the structure rarely leads you on a linear path. If only it was that beautiful and off you went way forward. It's always messier than that because people jump around with their ideas and their observations and their experiences. Okay, so that's a summary of the structure. Let me get into goal setting now, which is of equal importance and terribly important in making this purposeful and deliberately developmental. So, goal setting, we kind of all have to do this anyway, don't we, at work? I mean, that is the grim reality, is that you will be measured, on your goals, on your professional goals, and they will be reviewed annually. And Peter said, he's just done his appraiser training, so it could be with him in terms of, those goals that you're doing, but they will have an agenda associated with them. They'll have an agenda in terms of your department, your profession, all of the kind of the work-based stuff that will have a kind of hold over your life, if you like. And actually, mentoring goals are often quite different to that. They're different because they can be very personally motivating. So you're going to have to do goals at work because that's what strategically that department or that organisation is going to have to do at the moment. But mentoring goals have got that personal, ooh, yeah, want to do that, want to be involved in that. I've got energy for that. It should have that associated with it. They're often individually career orientated. So they might take you, to a different department, a different organisation, because actually you're following your own yellow brick road here, as opposed to simply just being a widget in the cog of your organisation. The mentor is unlikely to have a vested interest, and actually it's better if they don't. So it's better that, Peter or Joe are not my boss. It's better that I don't work with them. It's better that I'm not involved in research with them, because otherwise they're just going to be distracted by their own involvement in you and your journey and the decisions you make. And they can, of course, change radically over the course of mentoring. And I suspect both Peter and Joe will find this as they continue to mentor, is that what people show up with right at the get-go of a kind of mentoring conversation can be very, very different to what they're working on at the end of the conversation, because the process has allowed them to evolve their ideas. And that's okay. That's really okay. So let's talk about how we explore a mentoring goal. And this is something that needs to be done not only at the beginning of the mentoring relationship, but actually reflected upon and reviewed relatively regularly along the way. And actually that's done with really good quality questions, okay, and just keeping those questions open. So what do you want to achieve personally? As both Joe and Peter said, we think that our kind of professional life and our personal life are, moving in a parallel alongside each other, but of course they're not. They're tangled. They are tangled within the boundaries of your body and your life. So actually asking what you want to achieve personally is an incredibly valid question professionally, actually, and it can open up all kinds of different new ideas. And what Peter said about, I want to get to know the person too, is really important, because then you start to see the other facets of their life that could be really helpful to you. What will success look like for you? Now, for a lot of people are locked into this idea of success being associated with becoming a professor, or, getting a fellowship somewhere, or whatever. It's often associated with what their badge says, and the kind of the kudos of having stuff associated with you. But actually success could look like, not being stressed at the end of the day. It could be about being able to own a dog and being able to manage that in a busy clinical and academic life, appropriately for you both. So, think with very open minds about this stuff. How will you know when you've made progress? Well, of course, you need to be able to measure this stuff and realistically analyze what will feel and look different for you as a result of what it is you want to work on. How do you want to feel about your work? We don't often talk about feelings associated with our professional life, but I think it's really important, because we are in fact human after all, and emotions are a big part of us. And then asking, what kind of help from me would you find useful? So I urge the mentors to always say, to their mentees, what is it do you want from me? Do you want me to hold you account? Do you want me to help you with interview practice? Do you want me to just be a sounding board? What is it you want from me, rather than assuming? So having these open questions are really, really important part of all of this. And you can see how that plays out with Deepak, my case study earlier, because of that overarching goal that we'd established, feeling more confident about being a leader in the local community. I'm always going to go back to that, to pull him back into the reality of where he is now. So we need to test and refine those goals as we go along. We need to keep checking in with them. You need to really sort of home in on them. And so often people can be a bit kind of rambly about their goals. They can say, oh, I want to do this, and I want to do that, and there's some of that, and off they go in a kind of quite sort of chaotic way at sometimes. And I often find saying, can you say that in less words? It's not, I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to really get it down to the, you know, the heart of the matter, so that it becomes a really powerful statement in front of you. And that's not because I'm trying to kind of, you know, get rid of the detail. The detail will come. I'm just trying to really crystallize it down so that it becomes something really potent in front of me. Is it possible to break it down further? So sometimes, you know, if you've got a really sort of crystallized overarching goal that is the thing that is kind of your beacon that you're working towards, then are there like incremental little breakdown chunks that are a part of that we can then focus in on? That's another helpful way of doing it, particularly if you've got a kind of a marshmallow mess of stuff that people want to sort of get out. Actually saying this to people, so your goal is, Joe, to ... and getting them to complete the sentence. That's a really great way of helping people just, you know, encapsulate what it is they want to work on. How committed are you to this, Joe? You know, well, not really, actually. I don't know why I'm saying it. You know, that happens a lot. You know, I'm saying it because I think it sounds good to say it. Joe doesn't do this, by the way. I'm just making it up. But, you know, people say stuff because it sounds good or it sounds valid and legitimate. But actually, if you ask them, well, how committed are you to doing this? They'll go, oh, no, I really can't. Whatever it is, because actually, you know, I have 3 young children at the moment or whatever it is, and I need to be, you know, with them more, or whatever it is that feels important to you. And what is stopping you from achieving this now? You know, what is it? Now, that could be an external thing or it could be an internal thing. We've all got those little gremlins in our heads that might be kind of holding us back. So, you know, thinking about that in a very broad sense is really important. What I think is another useful, helpful way in terms of understanding goals, and actually, again, really helpfully, Joe and Peter started to allude on this at the beginning, is to think about what category the goal fits into. So is it a performance goal? Is it about confidence? Is it about conflict, for example? Is it about work-life balance? Is it a career stage goal? Is it about stepping up or stepping away? Is it about stepping back even? Or is it about being stuck and just not sure anymore? Or is it a technical development? Do I need to improve my skills? Do I need to get more knowledge? Do I need to enhance my experience? Now, when people are sharing their goals with you, I find it useful to kind of think about, well, is it technical? Is it performance? Is it career stage? And that's really helpful because then you can start to identify where they're coming from and how they're interrelated to each other with that. So, for example, I'm going to use Ellen as a case study. She is a clinical academic person working in surgery. And she's got 50-50 between those two sort of worlds for her. And she's just been asked to head up a new research centre at the university, which she's really excited about. So when we first started talking, what we were talking about is the stepping up. You know, I'm going to be head of this new research centre. I've never done anything like that. I'm really quite a little bit scared, actually, about that. And actually, I need to improve my knowledge about how this is going to work in the university, how it's going to fit, where funding is going to come from, how, you know. So I need to do some investigation into that aspect to it. But equally, there was a confidence stuff in there going as well. Oh man, really, can I do this? Me? How did that happen to me? You know, and the imposter syndrome of kind of, oh, what happened sort of kicks in terms of people feeling, you know, whether they're sort of up for it, if you like. So it's useful for you to observe where people's goals are sitting across those two things, because you can then, when you are going through that lovely grow model of the conversation and you're going back into the goal thing, you can identify, is this performance, is this knowledge, is this a career stage thing? And you can start to manage people's expectations. Now, usually people, when they first start sharing information about what they might want to talk about in mentoring, is they're more likely to talk about career stage and technical development. They're more valid, they're more kind of palatable. They're less likely to talk about the performance stuff up front, right from the get-go, unless they're really open and want to lay it out, roll out in there on the table for you. But it usually comes up. It's usually lurking underneath there for most people as an aspect of it. And so when you're talking about goals and when you're talking about using the structure of that conversation, understanding, how this interlinks between technical, career stage, performance, and where it really is at home. So is this actually really about something to do with confidence here? Is this more to do with just about not knowing enough at the moment? And is that related to confidence and you feeling like, kind of you don't know enough? Or actually, is there something relatively straightforward you can do in terms of stepping up or stepping away? And I think having really honest conversations with people about those things can be really helpful to people in identifying where they are and how that changes throughout the time, the course of the relationship with people. But it will oscillate around those points. So a summary of goal setting. Defining the goal can take time. In fact, it can take a couple of conversations actually to really home in on what somebody wants to really work on and what this is all about. Refining it is really essential. So don't just, accept, if you're the mentor, don't just accept that, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds like a really good goal. Yeah, okay, we'll go with that then. You really want to test it and challenge it and understand it and really analyze where it's come from and why it is the way it is, so that you're really sort of confident that it's the right goal. Both of you are really confident that it's the right goal. And also you need to review it regularly to make sure that it's still helpful and it's still working, because stuff can change and people can gain new insight that's helpful to them. And I do that often session by session. So are we still working on this? Is this still relevant? Is this still, the direction of travel that we're working on? Yes, it is. Actually, no, it's not anymore. My contract's coming to an end, and frankly, I want to go and surf somewhere else, in New Zealand, perhaps. So goal setting and really working through those three things and understanding that it takes time, it will need to be refined and it will need to be reviewed are pretty critical. So these are the challenges that I think are important for you to note with the structuring. Back into the GROW model, John Whitmore, GROW. The reality is people's emotions will flood their brains with all kinds of hormones, fight, flight, freeze, which actually, when you're trying to structure the conversation, can get in the way of you using the lovely, GROW. If they're emotional and upset or angry, excited about stuff, it can actually be quite difficult sometimes to get through that and untangle things. They will go off on tangents a lot of the time. People just do that. They get distracted by, and you won't believe what happened last week in, whatever. Gently pulling people back to the goal is an important part of the role. And actually recent issues can erupt. Can I just tell you, Peter, about this? Will happen, and that's fine, but actually, is it relevant? Is it relevant to the goal that we're working on here? So emotions, tangents, recent issues, they're all things that potentially can hamper or challenge your beautiful usage of the GROW model with GROW reality options and way forward. The other challenges in terms of goal setting is things like ambition. I'll have people got realistic expectations about where they're going with all of this, or are they expected from some other place, some other quarter? So how locked in are people to a particular perspective about what their career should look like, or what success should look like. And, you know, Sarah pointed this out earlier, you know, that you're potentially a group of people that are, you know, very high performers, probably perfectionists, probably locked into, you know, overworking, frankly. Sorry, that might seem rude, but in terms of over-investing in your professional life, because that's a valid thing to do, because your doctors, in fact, your cardiologist, it's the heart, man. So, you know, so that over-investment in the kind of the seriousness of this specialty, you know, seems like a valid thing to do, you know, and you need to be careful about that. You need to keep that in check, and your ambition about that in check. In terms of goal setting, distractions can get in the way, and other stuff can come up that doesn't allow people to sort of really lock into how productive and purposeful they want this goal to be about. And you just have to accept that that will happen, and pull them back. And then, of course, there's other people in the world that you have to work with and deal with, and they might be at home, or they might be at work, but actually they might get in the way, or they might be enablers. So you need to be careful about that. So they're the challenges that I think can be problematic with goal setting: is ambition and the direction of travel, distractions for other stuff that's just going on at the moment, and having to work with other people. So there we are. I have come to the end of my sort of sharing with you. So I'm going to stop sharing and come back into the main session, so that we can perhaps, you know, get some observations from Peter and Joe about, you know, their thoughts about how that sort of played out for them, whether that looks familiar, whether, you know, Peter's going to say, if only I knew this 6 months ago, or or whatever. That would be really helpful. But I'm going to hand you back to Jagdeep now and see what happens next. Is that okay?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Alexis, for a great session on a really important part of mentorship. So this is, and thank you for keeping to time, Alexis, bang on time. So that gives us about 20 minutes for the Q&A bit, which I think is just as important, if not more important, because this is the part where all of you get to post your questions, those burning questions that you may have, or even any reflections or any thoughts or experiences that you want to share with all of us. And if I may just ask everybody here, if you could turn on your videos, because that will just help with the interactivity. And if you want to say or ask anything, just raise your hands and we'll get to you. Or if you don't like that thing, you can always just put it on the chat and we'll get to that as well. So if anybody want to say anything, or shall I just, well, Alexis, this is just something that I was just thinking as you were going through the talk, is up until recently, I've been in a position where I had a mentor, and I have mentored as well. But it was always in a very informal setting. And so there wasn't any formal structure, there wasn't any formal goals. It was just, you know, I know you, or this person knows me, and they just help me along. And there wasn't even a structure of how long this relationship was going to be. It was just a continuous, almost like a friendship. And so there never really was a need to set goals. But of course, as being part of this program, I'm now mentoring someone whom there is a finite amount of time. There is an end point, which is a soft end point, but still there is a certain structure to it. And then when you start thinking about setting goals, a lot of the goals are, years away. And so how are you going to set a goal where you can't possibly expect to be able to then reflect on whether you've achieved the goal or not? And so how do you address that in setting really long-term goals, which is what we're probably going to be dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that. So I think that when we're talking about a formal mentoring scheme, that basically what this is about, where you're absolutely right, there is a set number of sessions in a set designated amount of time. So in a sense, you're up against the clock in reality, in terms of what you want to do. And I think it's perfectly legitimate for you to have an overarching goal that is, I want to have, let's just say, I'd really love to become a consultant in Scotland, but at the moment I'm an ST3 or whatever it is, you know. So you can have that long-term overarching goal as your nirvana, because you love mountain climbing, because then you can get to the hills easily. But working back from that, you can think about, well, what are the incremental steps that will allow me to achieve that in the short term, that add to the momentum of reaching that goal. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. You know, you're not going to be with them for that amount of time.
Yeah.
But it's perfectly reasonable to talk about that. Equally though, and here's a really interesting idea for you to think about. So I was working with a GP a few years ago who was within the last year of his clinical practice, and he came to me and he was basically very, very angry with his situation and the circumstances he found himself in. And he said, Alexis, you can't make me stay. I'm leaving this summer. I met him in like the April or whatever. He says, I'm out of here. I've had enough. I'm absolutely out of here. I was like, okay, then. So let's talk about your long-term goal. So this is starting to answer your question, Jagdeep, about, you know, how do you connect then with now? So I said, so what's your goal? You know, where do you want to be? What are you going to do? I'm not here to stop you, but just tell me what you're going to do after you've retired. He said, oh, well, I've got, you know, I'm going to do stuff with the dogs. You know, he was really into outdoor activities. He was really into, you know, those people who go out and do like crazy reenactments of the Civil War.
Right.
All of that, and his dogs, and it's all outdoorsy and really active and fun. I was like, oh God, that sounds really great. He said, I said, so what's stopping you from doing that stuff now? And he's like, oh, my knees, man. I was like, okay, your knees. So what's wrong? What's up with your knees? And he said, well, look at me. And he was very, very big. He was a big guy.
Right.
And he looked at me and he sat back in the chair and he was like, oh, I really need to think about this. I really need to think about this and that in the future. Right. He came back to me 2 months later and he had made a really life-changing decision about his weight, really life-changing decision. By the autumn, he was still working, but he'd had a surgery. He'd lost an enormous amount of weight and had started all of that stuff with the Civil War and all that kind of stuff. He was a changed person. He was a changed person. He did retire by the following January, but he retired on a positive. He retired because he was happy and he was excited about doing his stuff. His knees didn't hurt anymore.
So he had his cake and he ate it as well. And I guess the point that you're trying to make is you can have your long-term goals, but kind of break it down to what you can do now to be able to achieve that. And I guess the other thing that you pointed out is just the role of the mentor is almost like a sounding board. Yeah. And you know, you just get this out of your head because you have these ideas in your head, but until you actually bring it out and tell it to someone, only then you realize, oh wait, what am I saying here?
Exactly. Otherwise it's a fantasy.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Good. Peter, anything to add to that? You seem like you have something to say.
I was just going to say that's very much like that bit in Love Actually when he says, you know, the boy says, oh, I want to be a musician to be the band. He says only one tiny problem to that: you don't actually play an instrument. And
right.
To go back to his goals and then learn to play the drums and then get to play.
Yeah.
I love the stepwise thing. Really cool. I love having a structure to a set of goals. I think it's so helpful because it really helps you work out. You know, I use it all the time. You know, when I think I want to achieve this. Myself, I think, oh, you know, actually, is that what I really want to achieve, or just I want to do it because that's what's expected of me? So I think having a structure is really, really helpful.
Okay. And Joe, how about you? What, from a perspective of a protege, kind of having that structure and goals?
Oh, unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself.
Sorry. The last time that will ever probably happen. I think that it's very useful to have a structure. I agree with you very much so, Peter. I think that it then is balanced and coupled with what Alexis was also touching about how the goals is a very dynamic thing and it can change. And I think that mentoring can be really useful to make you realize that there are certain things sometimes you have to dip your toe into it to get a better idea of it, whether that's your subspecialty, whether it's research, whether it's something completely different. And I don't think there's any failure in setting goals and shifting goals. And that's a more sort of positive way of approaching it, rather than making your goals a bit too binary. So did you fulfill it, yes or no? And if the answer is no, then you have, you've not succeeded in some way. But we can shift our goals, and they're a much more sort of malleable thing. So I think those concepts work really well together. But I agree, goals are needed for motivation.
I was told once when I was training by one of the consultants I worked for, he said that if you'd have told him 10 years ago, what are you doing now, he wouldn't have believed you, because times change. So your goals can change because your career changes, different things happen. So you can always change your goals in the future depending on circumstances.
Right. Okay, so I've got a question here from one of the participants, and they ask, how do you deal with an informal mentor who is negatively impacting you, but you can't escape them due to the duration of your training commitment? So I guess probably someone senior to you who is affecting you negatively, and you're kind of stuck. So what do you do then? Well, I guess if they're negatively affecting you, not really your mentor then, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I appreciate that those, you are bounded into a number of different relationships when you're in training, that whether it be your educational supervisor or your clinical supervisor or whatever, you've got these people hanging around, and it's very difficult not to be affected by them, because they often powerful personalities, and they may have a say on where you go next, and all of that kind of stuff. And I think treading the line through all of that is going to be tricky. From the perspective of treating them as a mentor, then I think what I would urge people to do is to come back to this idea of making your own mind up. Other people will always have an opinion. Your mother will always have an opinion. Your friends will always have an opinion about what you're doing and how you're doing it. But actually, you need to keep reminding yourself that actually the most important opinion that matters is your own. And we need to get much better, all of us need to get much better at of owning our own power and finding our own voice through all of this, really. So that's not about necessarily, challenging back, but it is about holding those opinions more lightly and not letting them contaminate you so adversely, because they're over there, they're external to you, and you have the ability to grow a kind of shield, if you like, about that stuff, and you will have to grow that shield, that thicker skin, that's another way of putting it, has to be evolved throughout your life, and it does get easier as you get older, but they are just opinions.
Sarah, go ahead.
I would like to add to that. What I find really great about the mentoring relationship is the space for you to think about your goals, because I think a lot of us just follow the sort of path of a cardiology registrar and that hamster wheel, and we think these are our own goals, but we don't actually have made them our own goals. And I think it's really important what Peter said at the beginning, a sort of life part that interacts with your work part, and that you don't just stuck in that hamster wheel achieving one goal after the other, but also thinking about the long-term goals, the mountain to climb, the balance between life and work, and what would you want to look back to in 10 years time? Is it the 150 casts you've done, or is it the balance you'll be able to strike with your family? And I think a lot of us don't take the time to actually sit down and make these goals. It doesn't necessarily need to have a professional mentor. It needs to have the space and the time and the sort of bandwidth to develop these goals. And I think this is great about the mentorship program, that we have the opportunity to develop that with a more sort of senior person that sort of gives that helicopter view, what we were discussing in the workshops, to sort of sit back and reflect.
Yes, and coming back to this, kind of negative senior role on you. So I guess it's programs like this where you've got the opportunity to work with mentors out with your little circle, and kind of getting advice from them on how to deal with such situations and how to, I guess you can't really get out of these situations because you're stuck with this person for the duration of your training. But I guess being able to develop the skills to deal with this, which will not only help with your current problem, but of course you're going to face things like this going forward as well. Peter, what are your thoughts on this? On how juniors may feel negatively impacted by someone that may even inadvertently make them feel like they're out to get them.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult, isn't it? It's an uncomfortable situation, but it's the real world. We're always going to have people that you don't get on with. You're always going to have people that you clash with on a personal or professional basis. That's just how life goes on. I agree. It's about owning your own voice and knowing what you're doing is right, and being confident in what you're doing. And that if they are being bullied, that's a difficult thing altogether, and dealt with completely differently. But there's always going to be people you don't get on with. I mean, there are some people I don't get on with, not many, but there are some people I don't get on with. That's just life. You've got to learn to deal with it a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Great.
Jagdeep, can I just offer an example just to help with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sure.
For a second.
Sure. Of course.
Sometimes those things about sort of getting caught up and affected by negative people around you. What Sarah was just saying about having a different kind of helicopter, a different kind of perspective on the situation is also really helpful. Now, that's not me as a mentor saying, oh, that's rubbish, or that, that's a terrible thing to happen. But actually, I can have observations about this. So, for example, a client was talking to me recently about how rubbish she felt in a particular meeting, and she felt really underconfident in that meeting, and she was like really internalizing it and going, "Oh, what is it about me that's really can't cope with this meeting?" And And I said, "Well, just explain it to me. What's happening? How's it going? What's the?" So she explained it to me, and I said, "Do you think that might just be bad chairing?" And she went, "Oh. Yeah, actually, that's really bad chairing, isn't it?" I said, "So it's actually nothing to do with you at all then?" And she went, yeah, it's just rubbish chairing, isn't it? So she came back the following session. She said, "Oh, yeah, I don't worry about those meetings anymore now. I know it's just rubbish at chairing."
Right. Very good.
Sorry, I know Joe had her.
Joe, yes. Yeah. Go for it, Joe.
Just going to agree very much with what everyone says, and that is meeting people that perhaps your opinions or principles and certain things may not align. But I think particularly in our workplace, we have to all be conscious. And I think most people here have probably been perhaps guilty of it at some point over the last year, especially, but we're very exposed to work a lot of the time. And sometimes when people are being a negative influence or mentor, it might be because they're facing their own sort of questions about their career and so on, particularly during a challenging time. But as you said, it's about balancing that and seeking out people that you are more aligned with. And there's always someone somewhere. And as we're saying at the start of this, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone in your own team or your own hospital, but it may be someone in a different country or different part of the country. And there's always someone there to remind you of all the positives. And I think that as a sort of, in terms of networking and community, I think that's something that mentoring does provide a lot of. So maybe perhaps the slightly softer aspects of the career, but actually the really important ones in that sense, I think.
Absolutely. So I see that Zainab has a question to ask. Zainab, go ahead.
Hi, this is Zainab from Iraq. I'm an interventional cardiologist. Actually, first of all, I want to thank you for this webinar. It's great and very inspirational. Thank you very much for the stories. I want to ask, we always hear about the mentors and mentee, and for me, I see this is a great way for advancement in career. My question is that we know that we have to usually include ourselves within certain types of mentors, whether on research, whether on a professional, interventional experience, according to our needs and our career needs. But mostly we see the successful stories are from within the same countries. Sometimes I feel that there are certain parts I need in my mentor that maybe it's not found in Iraq, for example. I need another part of upgrading. It's not that I don't have great mentors here. I have really fabulous mentors here, but maybe we need more connection from other countries or other perspectives, other advancements. So is that possible with the structured mentor program that we heard about now? And is there any stories or successful stories or experience that anyone can share between mentee and mentors from other countries, and this was successful, and maybe we can learn how to experience such thing?
Fantastic questions, Am. So spreading your wings and getting the network as wide as possible. I'll be more than happy to give you my experience, but before that, Sarah's got something to say.
Thank you, Zainab, for asking the question, and also for the international audience. I also noticed Aisha and Purvi Pavani from America here on the meeting today. And I think the Global Women in Cardiology group has demonstrated how mentorship can work across the globe. And there are benefits for local mentorship and more national mentorship, because you know the structures and you know the problem, and you might be able to meet each other personally and get a different feel for each other. But I think we as a global women in cardiology group have demonstrated how we can benefit from mentoring across the globe. And I think Aisha is happy to share her view on that as well.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thanks again for this fantastic webinar. And Zainab, to answer your question specifically, I've had similar experience as well, because all of my training has been in Bangladesh, so I live back here. But as part of a social media network, and perhaps as one of the offshoots of COVID, we've learned to reach out and network. And I think what you can do is also seek out a mentor through social media who might want to invest the time for you. In my case, I've been very fortunate to be mentor matched with Dr. Srila Banerjee. She's very well known and respected within the UK WIC sphere and globally as well. And although it's only been something like a couple of months, I have learned so much from her, and also received, like you said, different perspectives that I did not have access to in terms of mentorship back here. I didn't have a WIC mentor for starters, so in that sense, it was fantastic. And like I said, I mean, I don't think a single mentor can fulfill everything, especially in a procedural specialty, especially as a woman in cardiology in a procedural specialty. I think it always makes sense to seek out mentors, but it has to be somebody who is a right fit for you. And I can't stress that enough. And I am really very grateful to have been matched with Srila, because there's so much to learn, and there's so much to share in terms of experience for what has worked for them in the UK, which I might just be able to replicate back here in my relationships, in my experiences, in meetings, if you want to say. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. Thanks, Sarah, for having me.
Fantastic. Well, great perspective there. Is anyone else wants to add into that experience, maybe? Well, coming back to Zainab's initial question about this, I have a very similar experience as well. And I'm from Malaysia. I trained in Malaysia, and I had a mentor in medical school who was one of the senior lecturers, and we were very close. After graduating, we kind of went our own ways. And about 4 or 5 years later, after doing my junior training, I was at a conference, and I met this mentor lecturer again. And he saw a presentation I made, and he came up to me and he said, well, you know, what are you doing here? You should really be, I'm going to get you in touch with some of my friends in the UK, where you can do some proper research, was the term that he said, suggesting that my little Mickey Mouse research, you know, giving you an idea of where I was at the time. But certainly it was that mentorship relationship that I had with him that kind of then set the scene for the next stage of my life, where he then introduced me to the guys here, and I got into a research program here, and then eventually got my training, and I'm now doing my training in cardiology here in the UK. And so that really is what a mentor can do for you. And you really don't know, there isn't that secret sauce, that secret recipe of going to this particular mentor or seeking out this particular program. And it's just being open to many different people who have this experience, who can share their experiences with you as mentors, and one may just land. And I remember when I had the first session with Alexis, and she said, what do you think a mentor is going to offer? I think what a mentor offers is that opportunity to kind of really up your game. I think all of us are really high achievers. We're all eventually going to continue to grow. But what a mentor offers is that step change, that it's going to change your trajectory from that to that and take it to the next level. And then you keep growing and you find another mentor, and that mentor will then take you to the next level. And that's what mentorship is about. It's about giving you that opportunity for that step change in your trajectory. And yeah, so certainly, programs like this, opening out as wide as possible, getting as many people and expanding that network is exactly what we want to do. We've got another question.
Much. Thank you all.
Sure, thank you for your question, and thank you for joining us from so far afield. I've got another question. Yes.
Can I just quickly add to that?
Go for it.
When we think, do you remember the slide I gave you where I was sharing with you what goal is it? Is it a technical development? Is it a performance thing, or is it a career stage? If you can identify where your goal as a mentee might be across those three realms at the moment, that should give you a clue as to who might be a good mentor for you. So if you're talking about, say, for example, a performance, which is a personal development thing around confidence or conflict or balanced health, you might not need a cardiologist. It could be a radiologist. It could be somebody who's completely different, but who has a lot to offer you. So be open-minded. That's all I was going to add. Sorry, Jagdeep, go on.
Sure, that's fine. So there's another question. It's a bit long, so I'm just going to read it out. How much does one usually expect of a mentor in terms of sponsorship, in inverted commas, like what Jagdeep is saying? Are the two mutually exclusive? Are they not, and to what degree?
The sponsorship, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to come in with a sponsorship is something completely different.
Yeah.
Sponsorship is not what mentoring is about.
Absolutely.
It's not wrong, but it's just different.
And even then, even in my experience, it wasn't a sponsorship. It was just him getting me in touch with a friend, and that's it. The rest, so I had to go through the interview process. I had to go through everything. But the point is, without that connection that the mentor gave me, this would have never happened. I am aware of time. I think we are at 8:34 just now, so I think it's time for us to wrap up. This is a fantastic session that we had, especially the Q&As, really great questions. I'm sure Sarah would be more than happy to field any questions through the Twitter handle. I don't know what the Twitter handle is. I'm not on Twitter, unfortunately. So Sarah's gonna tell us what that is, and we can continue this session offline, online, wherever, whenever, and more often in the future as well.
Thank you very much, Jagdeep, and thank you very much, Alexis and Peter and Josephine, for your contribution to this amazing evening, and for all of the participants coming on tonight. I hope we have taken this mentorship to the next level, and please mentor away and inspire other people, not only juniors but also seniors, as we've learned from Peter. It's a two-way, and I'm looking forward to the next event later on in the summer. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. See you around. Bye-bye.